Hello, and welcome to the final episode of this 10 episode series on preparation, participation, and integration. Thank you so much for coming back, and I hope that you did watch the first 9 episodes. I hope that you enjoyed them and found some benefit from them. If this is just you coming to the first episode, I will be summarizing those first 9 episodes in this, and if you do feel like something is interesting to you, then you can go back and look at that episode for a deeper dive into that topic. Again, my name is Carlos Tanner. I'm the director of the Ayahuasca Foundation. We're a nonprofit located in Iquitos, Peru, and we offer healing retreats, educational courses, and host important plant medicine research led by indigenous healers from the Shipibo tribe. You can check out more information on our website, ayahuascafoundation.org, if you want to learn a little bit more about what we do and what we offer there. But for now, I would just like to dive in to summarize what we talked about in those first 9 episodes of this series. There is another series, the first Lessons from Ayahuasca series, so if you haven't checked that out, maybe take a look at that as well in our YouTube channel. Again, I really appreciate you being here. In the first episode, when we started our discussion about preparation, I established a context through which I view health and healing, and especially preparation. I was talking about what I call the Trinity of Trinities, which was looking at my being through the lens of a mental body, an emotional body, and a physical body, and then how those tie to the trinity of matter as gas, liquid, and solid, and how those tie to the trinity in consciousness of ideas, beliefs, and truths. And then I talked about the 3 pillars of health, which I refer to as integrity, sustenance, and purity, and how if we have a lacking in one of those areas, that can lead to injury if we don't have integrity, deprivation if we don't have sustenance, and toxicity if we don't have purity, and how those can affect 1, 2, or all of our bodies. Typically, they have rippling effects into each of the other bodies. So we could have an injury to our heart, to our emotional body, and that can impact our physical and mental body. Or we can have a deprivation in the mental body, and it can have an impact on our emotional and physical body. Or we can have toxicity in our physical body, and it can impact our emotional and mental bodies. And all of those are usually at play in some way in issues of our health and our attempts to achieve well-being, thus leading us to take steps towards healing, and where the preparation for that healing to be optimized comes into play. And then I used a spectrum, introducing the spectrum of energy or anything really that you can put into it, of negative 100 to positive 100, talking about health, for example. The negatives would be unhealthy, the positives would be healthy. In our preparation, you're really trying to move as far as you can from the negative into the positive, and in that sense, you could posit the negative as the spectrum of fear, and the positive as the spectrum of trust, with the ultimate goal of being at the higher end of that, where you enter into states of faith, and how that leads to mentalities from fear, which would lead to resistance, into acceptance, and then into the higher states of trust, which lead to the ultimate goal of a mindset of embrace, and how when we achieve that mindset of embrace, we are activating the healing powers on all the levels within that trinity, such that we can increase the likelihood of achieving our health goals through whatever healing endeavors we try or practice or dive into. In the second episode, I talked about the importance of curiosity, awareness, and communication. And curiosity, I spoke about how it comes from the root cure, and that it is the mindset of healing. And because tied to curiosity is acceptance. We accept the way things are, and we strive to learn. And when we're in that mode of learning, then we open opportunities for growth. Growth and learning are 2 parts of the same coin, 2 sides of the same coin in the sense of our consciousness. In the preparation, we want to be mindful and aware and purposely make changes to our consumption, which we also should remember is not just by our mouth, although that is a primary source of consumption, but we are also consuming through our ears or through our eyes or our senses. And so we want to be mindful about everything that we're consuming, but we also want to intentionally make changes to that, because when we change our behaviors and get out of our routine or our comfort zone, then we create opportunities for us to learn more about ourselves, learning what patterns might be there. So it's really an approach where we say, okay, I want to reduce stimulation to increase sensitivity. And by increasing sensitivity, I enhance awareness. And then I want to take a let's see what happens approach to say, okay, let's see what happens if I stop drinking coffee, for example, or let's see what happens if I stop eating sugar. And that way we might open up an opportunity to learn more about ourselves through that curiosity, that mindset of healing, to recognize what could be the root causes or motivating energies of why we live the way that we live. And I gave some examples. One very common example is when we cut out sugar, then when we pay attention through that curiosity to a craving for sugar that comes up, then we might be able to trace that back to how we're maybe using sweets to self-soothe a particular element of our suffering. Maybe it's a particular trauma. Maybe we can trace that back to our root trauma and learn more about ourselves and why we act the way that we do. So I really stress in the preparation mindfulness when it comes to changing lifestyle patterns, awareness of all of our consumption, and then taking that curious, let's see what happens approach to making those changes, so that the goal is to learn as much as we can and gain as much self-knowledge. In the third episode, I talked about the importance of journaling, keeping a record. While we may be gaining insights in this root trauma tracing process or learning more about ourselves as we understand the motivating energies that guide us into the particular behaviors that we're aware of, we want to be recording those observations so that we can remember them. And we also want to be looking at our responses. How do I respond when I have a craving, for example? Or how did I notice when I felt that there was a craving, or when I felt that there was maybe a negative emotion tied to it? Was my response to get angry about it? Or did I feel guilty about it? Or was I able to forgive myself and have compassion? And so we want to be looking at those, but really we want to be sure that we're keeping that journal and recording those observations, recording those insights each day, if possible, opening up the journal and writing down the things that we want to remember, as well as purposely writing down the positive things, positive memories, times when we felt joy, times when we felt love, times when we felt at peace. Those are emotions that could be called regenerative emotions, because they actually give us energy, as opposed to negative emotions like shame or guilt or fear or anger. Those are degenerative emotions. They take energy away from us. So while we are looking for what we want to change, we also want to be journaling and recognizing what we have as blessings in our lives, remembering the moments where we did feel joy, and ultimately creating a regenerative memory playlist, because that will become an important tool later on and really can be an important tool anytime in our lives. But ultimately, you want to be journaling and keeping a record of those insights, both positive and negative, again, in this curious endeavor to learn more about ourselves. In episode 4, we started into the participation phase. Now, at the end of episode 3, I talked about the importance of reading the journal, remembering those insights, and perhaps seeing longer patterns. That's going to go a long way in the participation process. So to set up the participation process, I started with, again, our goal of bringing ourselves into the mindset of trust into the energy of our state of being, and that will set us up beautifully to activate our own healing processes once we get into the participation phase. The ultimate goals, we want to have courage to do what we need to do, whatever it takes type of attitude, acceptance, to accept the way things are, and ultimately to embrace the energy of the medicines that we're taking, the processes that we're involved in, the treatments that we're striving to have activate our healing processes. Now, I gave this mantra, whatever happens in the process is the process. And that's really a way to frame what could be challenging experiences. Maybe there's discomfort. Discomfort, we can remind ourselves, is the opportunity for growth. That's whatever happened in the process is the process. I'm feeling uncomfortable right now, but this is part of the opportunity for growth and learning. And so I'm going to strive to embrace this. I'm going to be curious about it. I'm going to see what I can learn, what lessons it holds for me, how I can grow and heal through this experience. So again, it's that fostering of curiosity, bringing myself through those phases from resistance to acceptance and ultimately to embrace. I know that when I start to feel the energies of ayahuasca, I tell ayahuasca, saturate my soul. That's my expression of my desire to embrace those energies of healing such that they activate my own healing energies inside. In the next episode within the participation, I introduced the concept that I discovered called the eighth note. This happened for me. It formed these ideas during one of my plant dietas, and that's the idea that there are 7 frequencies within our normal observable reality. They relate to the 7 frequencies of light that we know to be the visible spectrum, the 7 colors of the rainbow, the 7 chakras of energy sources in our being, and how they relate to the 7 notes in a scale, the 7 unique notes, and then the 8th note is the repeat of the first note at the higher octave. And so if we can achieve the 8th note of our being, we will commune with the first note of a higher dimension, which would be considered the world of spirits, or the higher intelligence, or the dimension of nature. And so our goal is to bring ourselves into our highest vibration, into that highest frequency, such that we can commune with that guiding wisdom and that intelligence that can help us to navigate our own healing experiences. I also talked about how we can calm ourselves and bring ourselves into coherence with heart-centered breathing. And that was the practice of taking a few deep breaths, imagining our breaths entering into our heart on the inhale, radiating out on the exhale, and then using that playlist from our preparation to call forth a regenerative memory, and then breathe in the emotion and the energy of that memory, that joy, for example, into our hearts and radiate that joy out through our hearts, ultimately harmonizing the rhythms of our system such that we are in tune, that our instrument of our life, our being, comes in tune. And that can be something that we can do before an ayahuasca ceremony, or when we're entering into a surgery, or before chemotherapy, or before a psychedelic assisted therapy session, or during, if we find that we're coming out of harmony or dysregulated. So it's a self-regulation practice that I found works really well, and it helps to continue us onward towards that embrace mindset. In the final episode, the participation part of the series, I talked about letting go of resistance and how important it is for us to be able to let go of those energies that may be bringing us into a state of resistance. And that starts with awareness. We need to be aware of what we are resisting, or that we are resisting, and to be able to check in with that, and within curiosity to ask ourselves, can I feel this energy? And then allow ourselves fully accept what that energy is and to feel into it. And then again, through curiosity, to ask, can I let go of this? And then to feel that shift move towards calling forth that regenerative memory, and then using that heart-centered breathing, allow ourselves to move on from the resistance that may have been in regards to a particular energy, that we can move forward again, away from fear and resistance, towards the neutral acceptance, and beyond into the trust of embrace. And then we got to the integration phase. The last 3 episodes of this series were on integration. I also set that up and began with a little bit of R&R, rest and relaxation, obviously just taking care of ourselves, nourishing ourselves, bringing us into a balanced state, being aware and mindful of our mental body, our emotional body, our physical body, really like taking the care to tend to whatever had been injured such that we recover fully from those injuries, nourish ourselves fully so that we have the sustenance that we need for our health, and then to also continue to clarify our thoughts and purify our bodies and our emotions, and to just take care of ourselves and also deepen our connection to nature. And that's going to be at the heart of this. Spending time in silence, in quiet contemplation, out in nature, really listening and growing along with that nature into forming these new identities that have come through the process of healing. The next episode, the 8th episode, I talked about a different, not RNR, but RMR, referential memory replacement, and how we can use the memories that we kept in our journal during the experience as ideas and seeds to plant so that we can develop different referential memories so that their influence is different, going from a detrimental influence to a positive influence by referring to a different memory. And maybe that looks like we're changing the memory to be more accurate, to have a deeper understanding of the same memory, but through a different lens of understanding, or by completely replacing it by having a memory from our healing experience that might have brought us into an epiphany or a realization of our divinity, or of something that just nullifies any of the previous referential memories that had detrimental influences. I also included that while the journal is a collection of our mental memories, typically, even if we're trying to capture the physical and emotional memories, it's also good to incorporate nonverbal elements in the conjuring and the recording and remembering of emotions and physical sensations. So that might look like doing artwork, creative expression work, and movement work, somatic work, dancing, things that can tie into the memories of our healing through the body, and those same memories of our healing through the emotions, and that same level of healing through the mind. So we're going to be working with our journal, transcribing our journal into a digital format to give us more space, creating that project-based approach to integration, but we're also going to be tying in the creative aspects of artistic expression and the divine aspects of sacred movement in somatic healing, or simply dancing or walking. Finally, the last episode, I was talking about listening and feeling into the power and the wisdom of nature. Awareness of our senses and sensations, our emotions and expressions, and our thoughts and our theories, and looking at, okay, these are the sensations in my body. This is the information that my senses are giving me or providing me. Let me take a look at that. Let me see what's there. These are the emotions about how I feel about something. And these are the expressions I'm noticing, my posture, my facial expressions. Am I making a fist, or do I feel relaxed and gentle? Those lend themselves to our emotional body, and then, of course, our thoughts and our theories, how we're putting these pieces together, what the meaning is that we're attributing to our experiences. Ultimately, we want to bring our awareness into all of those, looking for slight changes that would be changes in the trajectory of our life, even a small trajectory change can lend over time to a very big change as we move forward in that direction. And then ultimately we want to have a plan B, which is a reference not to plan A or plan B, but a plan B, B, E. How am I? Not what am I going to do, but how am I going to be? And that's a really good reminder that the reward for our work in these healing endeavors is not what we get, but who we become. And so continue with the journaling and the integration process, again, noting the changes that you see to solidify them and ultimately replace your referential memories with ones that have positive influences on how you perceive, interpret, and respond to your experiences today. And then now here we are in the last episode. I've shared with you all of those ideas and concepts, and the ultimate at the end is that you do your best. You try your hardest, or really you try your softest. And that's a good reminder too. This isn't a rigid process. This is a lot of flowing, just like water, one of the strongest substances in the earth, and yet it flows and takes the shape of whatever it needs to. So don't necessarily try hard at this. Try soft and love yourself, and it'll all work out. All right, that's the end. Again, thank you so much for visiting these episodes. I hope that you did learn some. Please like and subscribe, and please leave a comment if you have some ideas or would just like to share how this series went for you. Thanks again so much, and check out our website, ayahuascafoundation.org, if you want more information about the work we do down in Peru. Thanks.